Andre Whitfield was 38 years old, sitting in a boardroom he'd walked into 1,000 times, when his own wife looked away and let her family destroy him. He'd spent 12 years as the quiet VP everyone overlooked, the guy who fixed every mistake and took none of the credit. He never once resented it. That morning, an HR folder sat waiting on the table, and Preston Sinclair, his brother-in-law, leaned back with a satisfied smile and said, "This was always going to be a family business, Andre. You just worked here." Camille said nothing. Bradley Voss, a man Andre barely knew, watched with quiet satisfaction, like he'd already won something. They walked him out under security escort, past employees who couldn't meet his eyes, and drove home to an empty house and a locked drawer he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a document that would turn their entire victory into ash. But sitting there, key in hand, Andre hadn't opened it yet, and none of them knew what was coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The loading dock smelled like diesel and cold concrete. Andre Whitfield stood under the pale fluorescent lights of Sinclair Logistics and Freight's operations, floor at 4:47 in the morning, a paper cup of vending machine coffee in one hand, and a printed contract amendment in the other. Nobody else was here. That was the point. He set the cup on the edge of a metal desk and spread the paper flat. The error was right there on page 3. A transposed freight code, 2 digits flipped, that would have routed a full container shipment of medical supplies to a cold storage facility in Memphis instead of the hospital distributor in Charlotte. 48 pallets, a client worth $2.3 million a year. Preston had pushed the contract through at 6 p.m. the night before, right before leaving early for some dinner Andre wasn't invited to. He hadn't checked the routing codes. He never checked the routing codes. Andre had caught it at 11 p.m., sitting at his desk at home while Camille slept. He hadn't called anyone. He hadn't sent a pointed email to HR. He hadn't forwarded the error to Harold with a little note about Preston's carelessness. He just drove in before sunrise, pulled the contract, drafted the amendment himself, and left a corrected version on the operations coordinator's desk with a simple sticky note. Route confirmed. AW. That was it. Done. Quiet. He folded the original error into his briefcase anyway. Force of habit. He stood there a moment, the building humming around him in its pre-dawn stillness. Somewhere above him, on the 4th floor, was Harold Sinclair's corner office, still decorated the way his father Walter had left it, the old mahogany desk, the brass nameplate, the framed freight maps from the 1980s. Harold rarely came in before 9. On Fridays, sometimes not at all. Andre picked up his coffee and walked back to his office. By the time the rest of the building filled with noise and footsteps and the smell of someone's burned microwave oatmeal, the crisis had already been handled and buried. Nobody knew it happened. The coordinator found the corrected contract, processed it without question, and the Charlotte shipment went out on schedule. Preston arrived at 10:15, swinging his jacket over his shoulder, already talking on his phone with the kind of loud, easy laugh that filled hallways without filling rooms. Harold shuffled in at 10:30, pausing at Andre's open doorway. "Morning, son," the old man. He always called Andre that. He meant it warmly. Andre had stopped trying to figure out what it actually meant a long time ago. "Morning, Harold," Andre said. "The Q3 Ops summary is on your calendar for Thursday." "Good, good." Harold patted the door frame twice and kept walking. The dinner that evening was at the Sinclair family home, a wide brick colonial in Buckhead with white columns and a circular driveway that Camille's mother had always loved, and Camille had inherited a reverence for without question. The table was loud in that particular way it always was. Harold at the head, slightly glazed, nodding along to things he'd already half forgotten. Preston talking about a deal he was putting together. making it sound large and inevitable. Camille refilling wine glasses and holding the whole room together with small, skilled attention. The way she always did in social situations, was very good at this. Andre had admired it once. He sat where he always sat, third chair on the right. He ate, listened, and said the things that kept the evening moving without drawing attention to himself. Then Camille made a small comment, light, almost offhand, about a partner at a law firm she'd had lunch with. He made partner at 34, she said. She didn't look at Andre directly. She didn't have to. Impressive, right? Very, Andre said. She smoothed her napkin. It's just 12 years is a long time to still be VP, that's all. Some people would have pushed harder by now. Preston laughed from across the table. Don't worry, Cam. When I run this company for real someday, I'll find something bigger for him to do. Harold chuckled. He was already reaching for the bread. Andre lifted his glass and took a slow sip of water. He had been 26 the first time he sat in a room like this and felt invisible. He had been 31 when it stopped feeling like an accident. And he had been 32. 11 months into his marriage, 2 weeks into the worst quarter Sinclair Logistics had ever recorded, when he sat in a hospital room in the middle of a Tuesday night and held Walter Sinclair's hand while the old man's breath came slow and measured and deliberate, like someone dictating a final will. Walter's grip had been surprisingly strong. He'd looked at Andre with clear, direct eyes, not the soft, wandering gaze of the very sick, but the focused stare of a man who had already made peace with everything except the one last thing he needed to say. He'd whispered it once. Andre never repeated it. Not to Camille, not to Desmond, not to anyone. He folded it away like a document, kept it in the same locked place inside himself, where he kept everything that mattered. He was loading the dishwasher at 9:30 that night when his phone buzzed on the counter. A calendar invite from Preston's assistant. Operations Alignment Meeting, 9 a.m., Conference Room B. Preston had never once scheduled Andre's meetings. Conference Room B had a glass wall facing the hallway. Andre saw them through it before he even pushed open the door. Harold at the far end of the table, his big hands folded in front of him, eyes aimed somewhere just left of the door. Preston standing near the window, jacket on, arms crossed, wearing the particular expression he wore when he thought something was going to be fun. Camille in the middle chair, very still, her gaze locked on the table in front of her. And beside her, a man Andre recognized, but had only met twice, Bradley Voss, Preston's friend, his strategic consultant, a title that had never come with a contract or a desk or, as far as Andre could tell, any actual strategy. Bradley was leaning back in his chair with one arm hooked over the rest, relaxed in the easy way of someone who had already seen the ending of this movie. There was also a woman Andre didn't know. Mid-40s, navy blazer, a manila folder on the table in front of her. HR. Andre opened the door and stepped inside. "Good morning," he said. Nobody returned it. The HR woman, she gave her name, Linda something, Andre noted it and filed it, spoke first. Her tone was practiced, careful, the tone of someone who had done this many times and preferred not to feel it. She said the word restructuring 3 times in the first 2 minutes. She said position elimination twice. She said effective immediately once, at the end, and slid the manila folder across the table toward him with both hands, the way people hand over things they want to seem official. Andre did not pick it up yet. He watched her talk. He let her finish. He didn't interrupt, didn't shift in his seat, didn't ask any of the obvious questions. He just listened with his hands resting flat on the table, his face arranged in neutral, the way he'd taught himself to sit in rooms where other people expected him to fall apart. Camille did not look at him once. Not once. Her eyes stayed on the table, on a specific, fixed point, like she'd chosen it in advance and committed. Her jaw was set. Her hands were in her lap. If she was breathing, he couldn't see it. Preston waited until Linda had finished. Then he pushed off the window frame and walked around the table, slow, hands in his pockets, with the measured pace of someone savoring a moment they'd been looking forward to. He stopped a few feet away. "You've been great, Andre. I want you to know that." He said it the way you'd say it to a waiter who'd remembered your usual order, but this was always going to be a family business. He paused, just long enough to let it land. "You just worked here." Silence. Andre looked at Preston. He held the look for a long, quiet beat, long enough that something shifted in Preston's expression, some small flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, before the confidence sealed back over it. Then Andre looked down at the folder. "I'll need time to review the severance terms," Andre said. His voice was even, unhurried. "I won't be signing anything today." Linda nodded quickly, a little too quickly. "Of course, that's completely standard." "Thank you." He stood. He picked up the folder. "I'll be in touch." He didn't look at Bradley Voss on the way out. He didn't need to. In his peripheral vision, he caught the man's expression, that loose, settled satisfaction, the look of someone watching a problem get cleared off a board. Bradley turned to Preston almost immediately, something unspoken passing between them. Andre let the door close quietly behind him. Security met him at his office. One guard, young guy, uncomfortable, apologetic, in a way he couldn't quite put into words. He stood in the doorway while Andre moved through the room with the calm, unhurried efficiency of someone packing for a business trip. He took the things that were his, a few personal items, a framed photo of nobody that mattered to anyone but him, the books he'd bought himself. He left the company materials perfectly organized on the desk. His briefcase was already packed. It had been, in a sense, for years. He was almost past Yvonne's desk when he felt it. She was sitting very still, watching him cross the floor with wide, stunned eyes, the expression of someone watching something happen that they cannot stop and cannot believe. She had worked beside him for 7 years. She knew every schedule, every contract, every system in this building. She had never once looked at him like this. As he passed, her lips moved. "Call me." He gave the smallest possible nod. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Then he walked through the lobby, through the front doors, and out into the gray morning air. He sat in his car for a long time. The engine was off. His briefcase was on the passenger seat. The manila folder was on top of it, the edges perfectly aligned. Outside the windshield, bolted to the building's exterior above the entrance, the Sinclair Logistics and Freight sign caught the flat morning light. Dark letters on a pale background, still and permanent looking. He looked at it for a while. Then he started the car and drove home without saying a word to anyone. The house was quiet in the way that big, empty houses are quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow. Andre sat at his desk in the home office, still in his work clothes, dress shirt untucked now, sleeves rolled to the elbow, shoes still on. The lamp was the only light in the room. Outside the single window, the sky had gone the deep blue-black of a night, with no moon. Camille had texted at 6:15, with Renee. Don't wait up. Renee was her sister. They got dinner together, maybe 3 times a year, always announced in advance, always with a story afterward. What restaurant, what Renee said about her job, what they ordered. Andre knew Camille's rhythms the way you know the habits of someone you've lived beside for a long time. She hadn't mentioned Renee once all week. He set his phone face down on the desk. The fireproof drawer was in the lower left cabinet, behind a row of hanging files. Black metal, heavy, with a combination lock he'd set himself years ago. He turned the dial by feel. 3 numbers he'd never written down anywhere. The drawer opened without a sound. Inside, beneath a folded copy of his employment contract and a handful of unrelated documents, was the envelope. It was a standard legal envelope, the kind that came from attorneys' offices, thick cream paper, a wax-pressed seal on the back that he'd broken years ago and could no longer close. The return address in the upper left corner read, Hargrove and Associates, Estate Law. He'd received it 8 months after Walter Sinclair's funeral. He set it on the desk in front of him. He already knew what was inside. He had read every word more times than he could count, but he opened it again now, carefully, and laid the pages flat under the lamp the way you check a map before a long drive. Not because you've forgotten the route, but because you need to be sure. The trust documents were 14 pages, clean, precise language, no ambiguity. Walter Sinclair had established the Whitfield Irrevocable Trust on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 weeks before his death, with Hargrove and Associates as the executing firm. The asset transferred was 100% of the equity and controlling interest of Sinclair Logistics and Freight, LLC, the whole company, not a share, not a stake, all of it, to Andre James Whitfield as sole beneficiary and controlling trustee. There was a handwritten letter clipped to the back. One page, in Walter's cramped, slanting script, the pen pressed hard like the old man had wanted the words to stay. Andre didn't read the letter again tonight. He knew what it said. What it said was, I know my son. I know my grandson. And I know you. What it said was, wait until you're sure. He stacked the pages back in order, tapped them against the desk to align the edges, slid them carefully back into the envelope. Then he picked up his phone. Desmond Okafor answered on the second ring. Andre. His voice was easy, unhurried, the voice of a man who had not yet heard bad news and was not braced for it. It's late. What's up? They fired me today. Andre said it plainly, no drama in it. Preston and Harold. Camille was in the room. They brought in a consultant named Bradley Voss and an HR woman and called it a restructuring. A beat of silence on the other end. Not shock, exactly. Desmond processed things before he responded. It was one of the things Andre had always trusted about him. Are you okay? Yes. Did you sign anything? No. I took the severance folder to review. Good. Another short pause. Andre, what do you need from me right now? Andre looked at the envelope on the desk. I need to know something, he said. If I wanted to find out exactly what's been done to my company while I wasn't looking, contracts changed, money moved, titles claimed, how would I find that out quietly? Without tipping anyone off that I'm looking. The silence on Desmond's end was different this time. Careful. Like he was arranging something in his head before he spoke. That's a very specific question, Desmond said slowly. It's the only question I have right now. Another pause. Then, I can answer it. Not over the phone. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. My office, 9 o'clock. Desmond's voice had shifted. Still calm, but focused now, the way it got when something moved from personal to professional. And Andre, until we sit down, say nothing to Camille. Nothing to her family. Don't tip the folder. Don't ask questions. Just let them think today went the way they planned. I know, Andre said. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway. I'll be there at 9. He ended the call. He put the envelope back in the drawer, turned the combination lock until it clicked, pushed the drawer shut. Then he rolled his sleeves back down, buttoned the cuffs, and went to the kitchen to make coffee he didn't plan to drink. At 10:40, headlights swept across the front window. Camille was home. Andre sat at the kitchen table, both hands around the mug, and waited for the sound of her key in the door. Desmond's office was downtown, 12 floors up, with a view of the city that looked impressive from the outside and meant nothing once you were working. He kept it clean. No clutter. A line of law books on one shelf, a framed photo of his kids on the corner of the desk, and nothing else that wasn't functional. But Andre had asked to meet at the coffee shop 2 blocks south instead. He didn't want cameras in a lobby. He didn't want a receptionist who might recognize him or a sign-in sheet with his name on it. Not yet. Desmond was already at a corner table when Andre arrived, back to the wall, coffee in hand, a leather portfolio open in front of him. He stood briefly when Andre sat down, the way old friends do when the situation is serious enough to drop the casual act. Andre set the envelope on the table between them. Desmond didn't touch it right away. He looked at it. Then he looked at Andre. "Walk me through it," he said. Andre did. All of it. Walter. The morning at the hospital. The attorney's letter 8 months after the funeral. The trust documents. The condition to keep quiet. He spoke in a low, even voice. The coffee shop was half full of morning regulars and no one was listening. He laid it out the way you give a report. Facts first. No commentary. When he finished, Desmond picked up the envelope and removed the documents carefully, holding them the way you hold something that matters. He read slowly, his eyes moving line by line. He turned each page with a deliberate hand. His expression didn't change much. A slight tightening around the eyes on page 3. A small nod somewhere around page 9. When he reached the end, he set the stack down and sat back. "This is clean," he said quietly. "Hargrove does solid estate work. The language here is airtight. Irrevocable trust, sole beneficiary, controlling trustee. Andre, this isn't a gray area." He paused. "You own the company. You've owned it since the filing date." Andre nodded once. He already knew. But hearing Desmond say it out loud was different. It landed in a way the words on the page hadn't. Not fully. Not until now. "I need you to start building a file," Andre said. "Quietly. Whatever Preston and Bradley Voss have touched since I walked out that door, contracts, bonuses, titles they're claiming, I want it documented. I'll start today." Desmond slid the documents back into the envelope and passed it across the table. "You keep the originals. I'll work from certified copies." He picked up his pen. "And you? What's your position right now?" "What are you telling them?" "That I'm figuring out next steps." Desmond looked at him steadily. "Let them believe that." "I intend to." He told Camille that same morning when he got home. She was in the kitchen, laptop open, a mug at her elbow. She looked up when he came in, and her expression did a small, careful thing, something between relief and guilt, that she covered quickly with concern. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Okay," Andre said. He poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter. "I'm going to take a little time. Figure out next steps." Something in her shoulders loosened, just slightly, like a tension she'd been holding had quietly released. "That makes sense," she said. "You've been going hard for 12 years. "Yeah," he said. She went back to her laptop. Andre drank his water and said nothing else. He called Yvonne on a Tuesday. She picked up before the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. They met for lunch at a Thai place on the east side, far enough from the Sinclair Logistics building that no one from the office would walk by. Yvonne arrived in a tan blazer, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, looking exactly as composed as she always did. But when she sat down, she leaned forward with her forearms on the table and dropped the composure like a coat she'd been wearing in the cold. "They moved your nameplate the same afternoon," she said. "Preston had someone clear your shelves before you were in the parking lot." Andre nodded slowly. "Tell me what you're seeing," Yvonne told him. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with the same precision she'd brought to 12 years of managing his schedule and his correspondence. Preston had stopped showing up before 10. Bradley Voss was in the building almost daily now, walking the floor like he already had a title. The vendor meeting Andre had spent 3 weeks preparing for had been handed off to Preston, who had shown up to it 40 minutes late and underprepared. "I'll keep my ears open," Yvonne said. "But you didn't hear any of this from me." "I never do," Andre said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. 3 days later, she texted him a single line. Check your email. The attachment was a scanned document. A new vendor contract draft. 4 pages, still marked with revision notes in the margin. Andre read it at his kitchen table in the early morning quiet. His jaw tightened. The terms were reckless. A restructured payment schedule that pushed risk entirely onto Sinclair Logistics' side, with penalty clauses Preston had either missed or simply ignored. It would cost the company badly if anyone signed it. And at the bottom of the last page, in the signature line where an authorized officer's name should appear, someone had typed Bradley Voss's name. Bradley Voss, who held no title at Sinclair Logistics. Not one. Andre set his phone face down on the table. The call came on a Thursday morning. Andre was at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, going over notes from his last conversation with Desmond, when his phone buzzed. Yvonne's name on the screen. He picked up. "I need to see you in person," she said. Her voice was steady, but the urgency underneath it was plain. "Not over the phone." "Same place?" Andre asked. "Somewhere different." They met at a sandwich shop near the public library, the kind of place that stays half empty on weekday mornings. Yvonne was already there when he arrived, sitting at a table near the window. She had a canvas tote bag in the chair beside her. She didn't stand this time. She just looked at him and waited for him to sit. "How much do you know about Camille's schedule?" she asked, once he settled. "What I'm told," Andre said. Yvonne opened the canvas tote and set a thin folder on the table between them. "She asked me to cover her calendar twice last month," Yvonne said. "Move a few things around, reroute some client calls. I didn't think anything of it at first." She paused. "Then I noticed the pattern." Andre opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, 2 hotel receipts, and a set of building badge swipe records from Sinclair Logistics' internal security system. He looked at them without picking them up. Just read what was there. The hotel receipts were from a downtown property, about 6 miles from the office. One was from 14 months ago, the other from 9 months ago, both midweek, both for a single room booked under a corporate account registered to Bradley Voss's consulting firm. The badge records showed Camille and Bradley entering and exiting the Sinclair Logistics building within minutes of each other on a dozen separate evenings over the past year. Always late. Always after most of the staff had gone home. Andre looked at the dates. He looked at the times. He read every line on every page the way he read every contract, all the way through, without skipping anything. Then he closed the folder. "How long have you known?" he asked. "I put it together last week," Yvonne said, "when I started looking more carefully." Andre nodded slowly. He set his hands flat on the table. The coffee shop was quiet around them, just the low sound of a radio behind the counter, and someone typing at the far end of the room. He said, "Keep documenting." Yvonne watched him for a moment. "Andre, I'm okay," he said, calmly, plainly. Not the way someone says it when they're trying to convince themselves. "I need you to keep documenting. Whatever you find, whenever you find it. Same as before." She held his gaze. Then she nodded. "There's more," she said. She reached into the tote again and pulled out a single printed page, an internal email chain she'd printed from her workstation the night before. She slid it across to him. "Preston is pushing Harold to approve a loan," she said. "Aggressive expansion, the kind with company assets as collateral. Real estate, equipment, the distribution contracts. He's been walking Harold through it piece by piece, framing it as growth. Harold keeps asking questions he's not getting straight answers to." Andre looked at the email chain. Preston's name at the top. Harold's short replies underneath, the kind you write when you're trying to seem engaged, but don't fully understand what you're agreeing to. "Has Harold signed anything?" Andre asked. "Not yet." "When are they meeting?" "End of next week, from what I can tell." Andre folded the email chain once and slid it back toward Yvonne. She tucked it into the folder with the rest. "One more thing," Yvonne said, and her voice dropped just slightly. "Bradley Voss. He called Meridian Freight on Tuesday. I only know because the rep called back and asked for the incoming COO, and our receptionist didn't know who she was talking about. Yvonne paused. He's introducing himself to vendors and clients as incoming COO. Not consultant, not advisor, COO. Andre was quiet for a moment. Does anyone inside know he's doing that? Preston knows, Yvonne said. I think he's encouraging it. Andre sat back in his chair. He looked out the window at the street outside. A delivery truck rolling past, a woman with a stroller, the ordinary motion of a Thursday morning. He understood it now. All of it, assembled together. The firing wasn't just Preston's ambition running loose. It wasn't just a family company closing its ranks. Camille had needed him gone from the business because the business was the last thread still tying him to her daily life. Cut that, and everything else could follow. The marriage, the name, the inconvenience of a husband who paid close attention. Bradley Voss wasn't just Preston's ally. He was angling for the title, the role, and the woman. And the only thing standing between him and all three had been Andre. Thank you, Andre said. He meant it. Yvonne picked up her tote. Be careful, she said quietly. Always. That evening, Andre cooked dinner. Nothing complicated. Chicken, rice, something green from the refrigerator. He set the table the way he always did. 2 places, the good plates, glasses filled. Camille came home at 6:30, her work bag over one shoulder, her phone in her hand. She stopped briefly when she saw the table. You cooked, she said. Seemed like a good night for it, Andre said. She sat across from him and picked up her fork. She talked about her day, a client call that ran long, traffic on the bridge, something her assistant had gotten wrong. Her voice was easy. Her posture was easy. She looked exactly like a woman with nothing to hide. Andre ate his dinner and listened and watched her closely. For the first time. Andre laid everything on Desmond's conference table in a single neat row. The trust documents first, then Preston's vendor contract drafts, then the printed email chain about the expansion loan, then the folder Yvonne had given him, hotel receipts, badge records, all of it. Desmond sat across from him and read quietly, moving through each page with the careful attention of a man who charged by the hour and earned every cent of it. He didn't rush. He didn't comment until he'd finished. The office was on the 14th floor of a downtown building, all glass and clean lines, and the morning light came in flat and steady across the table. Finally, Desmond set the last page down and folded his hands. Let's start with Voss, he said. All right. Representing yourself as an incoming officer of a company to outside vendors when no such appointment exists, that's not just embarrassing. Desmond tapped the badge records lightly with one finger. Depending on what he said and whether anyone acted on it, that's potentially actionable misrepresentation. If a vendor changed their terms, extended credit, or entered any kind of agreement based on his claimed authority, he's got real exposure. How real? Andre asked. Real enough that it doesn't go away when the story comes out. It follows him. His consulting reputation, future clients, anyone who runs a background check on his professional conduct. Desmond paused. It's the kind of thing that finishes a career that was already built on borrowed credibility. Andre nodded once. And Preston's loan negotiation? Desmond leaned back in his chair. He's negotiating the use of company assets as collateral without legal authority to do so. He's not the owner. He's not even formally appointed president. There's no board resolution, no amended operating agreement, nothing. He's acting like he has authority he was never given. He looked at Andre steadily. That's a breach of fiduciary duty, possibly fraud, depending on what he represents to the lender about his standing. Has Harold signed anything yet? Has he? Not as of last week, Andre said. Then the damage is still containable. But it won't stay that way. Preston's going to push until Harold signs something, because Harold always does. Andre looked at the row of documents on the table. 12 years of quiet work. 12 years of fixing things no one saw. And now he could see the full shape of what had grown in the space his absence left behind, like mold in a wall, invisible until the damage was already deep. "What do I need to do?" Andre asked. "Keep documenting. Don't tip your hand. And don't let Preston's loan close." Desmond paused. "The rest we handle at the meeting." 2 days later, Andre called Marcus Webb. Marcus ran Webb Distribution, one of Sinclair Logistics' oldest regional clients. A solid account, steady volume, and the kind of relationship that took years to build and minutes to ruin. Preston had nearly managed the latter. From what Yvonne had described, he'd missed 2 follow-up calls, sent a junior rep in his place, and then told Marcus the account terms were under review, without offering any explanation. Marcus picked up on the second ring. "Andre Whitfield," he said, and there was a warmth in his voice underneath the surprise. "Wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I know," Andre said. "I wanted to reach out personally. I heard the last few weeks were rocky on our end. That's not acceptable, and I wanted to say so directly." There was a pause. "You leaving the company?" "I'm in transition," Andre said, which was true enough. "But that account matters, and you matter. I didn't want you sitting with unanswered questions." They talked for 20 minutes. Andre listened more than he spoke. He answered what he could, promised what he meant, and by the end of the call, Marcus sounded settled, satisfied. The kind of satisfied that keeps a contract in place. Andre hung up and made a note in the legal pad he'd been carrying everywhere lately. Marcus Webb, confirmed. One less fire Preston didn't know was still burning. Camille called on Thursday afternoon. "I've been thinking," she said. Her voice was soft, carefully measured. "I think we should sit down and talk, before anything gets more complicated." "Sure," Andre said. "Not about blame," she added quickly. "Just talking things through, like adults. Figure out what makes sense going forward." "That's reasonable," Andre said. She suggested Saturday, a coffee place she liked, neutral ground. Andre agreed and kept his voice easy and unhurried the entire time. The same tone he used when reading a contract he already knew was bad, but hadn't decided how to handle yet. After they hung up, he sat still for a moment, before anything gets more complicated. She was probing, checking whether he had anything, framing the conversation as mature and mutual so that whatever he said would feel like disclosure, not defense. He understood the play. Bradley Voss reached out the following morning by text. "Hey man, I know things ended weird. I might have something that could work for you. Consulting side, your logistics background. Worth a coffee if you're open to it." Andre read it twice. He typed back, "Sure. Let me know when works." Saturday came. Camille was already at the table when Andre arrived, her hands around a ceramic mug, her expression arranged into something that looked like concern. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Of course," Andre said, sitting down. She talked around the edges of things, the stress of the past few weeks, how hard the situation had been on her, how she hadn't wanted any of this to go the way it did. Her words were careful, sympathetic even. The performance of a woman who felt bad without ever saying what for. Andre let her talk. He asked a few quiet questions about her father, how Harold was doing, whether Harold had any sense of what was coming next for the company. Camille answered without thinking much about the questions, just grateful the conversation was staying civil. By the time he stood to leave, he had confirmed 2 things. Harold still didn't know about Bradley. Camille had kept that buried deep, sealed off from her father entirely, too careful of her image to let that particular truth into the room. And Harold believed what Preston had told him, that Andre had been let go because he wasn't the right fit anymore, that the company had simply grown past him. The shareholder rights clause was on page 41. Most people never read that far. Most people skimmed the executive summary, initialed the corners, and assumed someone else had handled the details. Andre had read every page of Sinclair Logistics' original incorporation paperwork the same week Walter gave him the trust document, not because he was told to, but because that was how he did things. Quietly, thoroughly, without announcing it. He'd bookmarked page 41. "It's clean," Desmond said, sliding his reading glasses off and setting them on the table. They were in Desmond's office again, late Friday afternoon, the city going golden outside the windows. As majority shareholder, you have the right to call an emergency shareholders meeting with 72 hours notice. No one can block it. No one can reschedule it without your consent. Harold won't know what it's for until we're in the room, Andre said. Correct. The notice only needs to describe the general subject matter. I'll draft it as a routine trust review. Desmond clicked his pen once. Technically accurate, totally incomplete. Andre almost smiled. Send it to Harold directly, not through Preston. Already planned. Harold is still the chairman of record. Legally, he's the right recipient. And practically, Desmond paused. It means Preston doesn't see it until Harold decides to show him. Harold will show him immediately, Andre said. Of course he will, but by then, the meeting's already confirmed. Yvonne called Sunday morning while Andre was going through the documents one last time at his kitchen table. I've got a full head count for you, she said. Her voice was low, careful, the same tone she'd used for the past 3 weeks. The tone of a woman who had decided which side of history she wanted to be on. Go ahead, Andre said. Harold confirmed Friday evening. Preston confirmed Saturday morning. He called it a nothing meeting in the group text, for what that's worth. A brief pause. Camille confirmed an hour later. And Voss? He heard Yvonne exhale quietly. Preston texted Bradley after Harold confirmed. Bradley RSVP'd himself as Preston's strategic advisor. No one invited him. He just told Preston he'd be there. Andre looked down at the page in front of him. The trust document. Walter Sinclair's signature at the bottom. Slow and deliberate. The handwriting of a man who had chosen carefully and meant every word. That's fine, Andre said. Andre. Yvonne's voice shifted slightly. Are you ready for this? He thought about the question for a moment. Not the legal part. Not the paperwork, the citations, the ordered sequence of what would be said and when. He had all of that. He thought about the other part. The room, the faces, the 12 years that had led to a Monday morning boardroom, and a door he intended to close himself. I've been ready for a while, he said. The documents were laid out in order by Sunday evening. Andre and Desmond went through everything one final time at Desmond's dining room table. Better than the office. Quieter. No interruption. The trust documents on top. Then the incorporation paperwork with page 41 tabbed. Then Preston's renegotiated vendor contracts, annotated in the margins. Then the expansion loan paperwork, unsigned but already partially negotiated. Then the folder on Bradley Voss, the misrepresentation emails, the vendor correspondence where he'd introduced himself as incoming COO, the detailed notes Desmond had prepared on actionable exposure, and last, in a separate envelope, the hotel receipts and badge records. The affair. That one Andre handled alone. That one wasn't for the table. Everything holds, Desmond said, stacking the last folder squarely. Every claim is documented. Every citation is current. There's nothing in here that can be challenged on procedural grounds. Good, Andre said. They sat for a moment without speaking. The house was quiet around them. Walter would have liked this, Desmond said. Andre didn't respond to that. He just closed the folder and set it with the rest. Monday morning, Andre arrived 40 minutes early. The Sinclair Logistics boardroom was on the 3rd floor, a long rectangular space with a mahogany table that seated 12 framed industry awards on the walls and a credenza along the far side where someone had already set out water glasses and a carafe of coffee. The building felt different this early. Still, the overnight cleaning crew had been through, and everything smelled faintly of polished wood and carpet cleaner. André set his materials at the head of the table, not the side. The head. Desmond arranged his own documents to André's right, quiet and deliberate, setting a notepad and 2 pens parallel to the edge of the table. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much left to say. At 5 minutes before 9, they heard the elevator down the hall. Harold came in first, moving slowly, reading glasses already on his forehead. He looked at André, then at Desmond, and his face went slightly uncertain, the expression of a man who had expected something smaller, something administrative. Preston was behind him. He stopped in the doorway for half a second when he saw André. Then his jaw reset, and he walked in. Camille came next. She looked at André the way you look at something that shouldn't be there. Bradley Voss stepped in last, a leather portfolio under his arm, already scanning the room. André waited until all 4 of them had taken their seats. Then he walked to the door and closed it himself. André didn't sit down. Everyone else had settled into their chairs, Harold near the middle, both hands flat on the table. Preston to Harold's left, already leaning back with the easy posture of a man who expected to be bored. Camille across from Preston, her expression neutral, controlled. The same face she wore at client lunches when she needed to seem unbothered. Bradley Voss at the far end, the leather portfolio open in front of him, a pen already in his hand, like he had notes to take. Desmond sat to André's right. André stood. He let the silence run for a moment. Not long, just long enough for the room to register the difference. "I have one question before we start," he said. His voice was even, unhurried. "Does anyone here recall the exact terms of Walter Sinclair's estate?" Harold blinked. He reached up and adjusted his reading glasses, even though he hadn't opened anything yet. "Walter's estate was, it passed through the family trust. Harold Sinclair Sr. reviewed everything personally before." "The family trust," Preston said, cutting his father off, a small impatient wave of his hand. "Standard stuff. Dad inherited the company. It's all been on record for years." He glanced at Desmond, then back to André. "What does Walter's estate have to do with a trust review?" "Everything," André said. He reached for the first folder. He opened it and placed the documents flat on the table, turning them to face the room. He didn't slide them. He set them down with both hands, precisely the way you set something down when you want it to be seen clearly. "Walter Sinclair did not leave this company to Harold," André said. "He transferred full ownership, sole and complete, into a private trust." He paused. "With me as the sole beneficiary and controlling party." No one spoke. Harold's mouth opened slightly. He leaned forward and pulled the top page toward him, his reading glasses dropping from his forehead down to his nose in one slow movement. His eyes moved across the page, then moved back to the beginning and read it again. Preston laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the sound a person makes when they need a second to catch up. That's not." He straightened in his chair and pointed at the folder. "That's fraudulent. Walter would never have done that. This is fabricated." "It's notarized," Desmond said. His voice was calm and clean, the voice of a man who had been expecting that exact objection. "By 2 separate notaries, witnessed by Walter's estate attorney and a second counsel present at Walter's request. The chain of custody is documented from execution to present day." He turned a second page toward Preston and tapped it once. "The date is there. The signatures are there. I've had 3 independent attorneys review it in the last 2 weeks. It holds." Preston looked at the page. He didn't pick it up. "Walter went to considerable effort to ensure it was airtight," Desmond continued, settling back. "He didn't want it challenged. He anticipated that it might be." Harold had not looked up from the document. He was still reading, both hands pressing the pages flat. and the color in his face had changed. Not angry, not calculating, just quietly undone, like a man watching something reshape itself into a version of events he'd never considered. His father, his own father, the man who had built Sinclair Logistics from a single freight contract and a second-hand truck. And he had looked at everything Harold had produced, everything Preston had become, and he had chosen the quiet man who married into the family and said nothing. Harold took his glasses off. He set them on the table and pressed 2 fingers against his mouth. He didn't say a word. Camille was still. Her eyes moved from the documents to Andre and stayed there, measuring something she wasn't going to say out loud. Not here, not yet. At the far end of the table, Bradley Voss slowly clicked his pen closed. He set it on the portfolio. Then he closed the portfolio. He did all of it carefully, one motion at a time, like a man trying to be very quiet. He pushed his chair back from the table and stood, tucking the portfolio under his arm. He took 1 step toward the door. Bradley. Andre's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Voss stopped. Andre looked at him, not with anger, not with heat, just looked at him the way you look at something you've already accounted for, already measured, already handled, already placed exactly where it needed to be. "Sit back down," Andre said. Voss didn't move for a moment. "You'll want to hear this part, too." The leather portfolio shifted under Bradley's arm. His jaw moved once, a small adjustment, the kind a man makes when he's running numbers in his head, and the math isn't coming out right. He looked at the door. He looked at Andre. Then he sat back down. Andre turned back to the room. Andre picked up the second folder. He didn't open it right away. He held it in one hand and looked at Preston. "You've been busy," Andre said. Preston said nothing. His jaw was tight. The easy posture was gone. 3 vendor contracts renegotiated in the 2 weeks since my termination. Andre opened the folder and laid the pages out, one at a time, like cards. New payment terms, extended grace periods on delivery penalties, clauses that reduce our leverage if a vendor misses a deadline. He tapped the last page. This one alone exposes the company to roughly $400,000 in unrecoverable loss if Mercer Freight defaults, which, based on their last 2 quarters, is not unlikely. Preston leaned forward. Those contracts were necessary. The terms Andre had in place were protecting the company, Andre said simply. These don't. He moved the pages into a neat stack and set them aside. You renegotiated them without board approval, without ownership approval, without any authority that would hold up in a courtroom. He let that sit for a second. Desmond opened his own folder. The unauthorized modification of existing vendor contracts by an officer without shareholder or board approval constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty under state corporate law. That's not a technicality. That's exposure. He looked at Preston without blinking. Personal exposure, depending on how aggressively the affected parties pursue it. Preston looked at his father. Harold was staring at the table. Andre turned to Harold directly. His tone didn't harden. If anything, it softened, not with warmth, but with something more like quiet disappointment. "The expansion loan," Andre said. Harold looked up. Andre placed a single document in front of him. "You signed this 11 days ago. Do you know what it says?" Harold looked down at it. A long moment passed. Preston said it was standard growth financing. Harold said quietly. "It uses the company's primary distribution facility as collateral," Andre said. "The terms allow the lender to initiate a claim on the property after a 90-day payment default. There is no cure period beyond that." He pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. "That section waives the company's right to renegotiate in the event of a market disruption. You signed it without that clause being flagged." He paused. "You signed it without reading it." Harold sat very still. He didn't defend himself. There was nothing to defend. The loan can be unwound, Andre said. But it has to happen quickly. Desmond is already in contact with the lender. He pulled the document back. It will be handled. He moved on without lingering on it. He turned to the far end of the table. Bradley Voss met his eyes without flinching, but his hand on the portfolio had gone tight. You introduced yourself to 7 vendors and 2 freight clients as incoming Chief Operating Officer of Sinclair Logistics, Andre said. I have 6 of those conversations in writing. One on a vendor's letterhead, where they reference your title directly in the body of the letter. He set copies of each on the table, spaced apart, so each one was its own separate fact. You were never offered that title. You were never discussed for that title. You have no employment agreement with this company in any capacity. I was acting in an advisory. You were not, Andre said. An advisor does not represent himself as an incoming executive officer to outside parties. That is misrepresentation. When it's done to gain business credibility or influence contracts, it carries its own legal weight. He looked at Desmond. We'll be notifying each of those vendors and clients directly, Desmond said. And the company will be pursuing a formal misrepresentation claim. I'd recommend you speak to an attorney before the week is out. Bradley said nothing. The confidence he'd walked in with had gone somewhere, and he hadn't been able to find it since he sat back down. Andre looked around the table. His voice stayed level. I'd like everyone except Camille to step out, please. Preston looked at his sister. She didn't look back at him. Harold stood first. Slow, heavy, like the movement cost him something. He picked up his glasses and put them in his breast pocket and walked to the door without speaking. Preston stood next. He looked at Andre for a moment, something hot and unresolved in his face, and then he left without a word. Bradley gathered his portfolio and followed. He didn't look at Camille. The door closed. The boardroom went quiet. Just the two of them, the hum of the building's air system, and the pale morning light coming through the windows on the far wall. Andre reached into the last folder. He set the hotel receipts on the table. Then the badge swipe records, with the dates highlighted. Then one printed photograph, a timestamp on a shared building entry, 2 names side by side. Camille looked at them. She didn't touch them. He watched her face move through something complicated. The control she'd worn all morning began to come apart at the edges, slowly, the way ice cracks before it gives. Her chin dropped. Her shoulders pulled in. A sound came out of her that wasn't quite a word, small and compressed, like something she'd been holding back longer than today. Her hands came up to cover her mouth. Andre, I know everything, he said. Quiet, final, no anger in it. All of it. How long it's been. Who he is to you. What you used this company to do. She was crying now. Silent tears, her eyes red, her breath uneven. I'm not going to humiliate you, he said. That's not what this is. He picked up the documents from the table and returned them to the folder. But this conversation is over, he said. And so is the marriage. He picked up his folders, straightened them once, and walked to the door. He didn't look back. The letters went out on a Tuesday. Andre sat at the desk in his home office, the same desk where he'd opened the trust documents the night they fired him, and signed each one personally. 6 vendors, 2 freight clients, 8 letters on company letterhead, each one clear and direct, stating the same thing in slightly different language. Bradley Voss held no title at Sinclair Logistics and Freight. He held no employment agreement. He had never been offered the role of Chief Operating Officer, incoming or otherwise. Any representation he made to the contrary was unauthorized and did not reflect the company's position. Desmond had reviewed every word. Andre folded the last letter, slid it into its envelope, and set it on the stack. That same morning, he sent a formal termination notice to Preston Sinclair. Effective immediately. Severance calculated to the legal minimum. The letter was 2 paragraphs. It didn't explain itself. It didn't need to. Preston called 4 times before noon. Andre didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in that boardroom. Harold was harder. Not emotionally. Andre had made peace with Harold's failures a long time ago. What was hard was the practicality of it. Harold's name was still on the building directory. His face was still on the company's about page. A photo taken years ago when he could still pass for sharp-eyed. Removing him entirely would have been easy. It also would have been cruel in a way Andre didn't want to be. So he kept him. Chairman Emeritus, a title with no authority behind it. No voting rights, no signing power, no seat at any table that mattered. Just the title itself, like a frame with no picture in it. Harold accepted it without argument. He came to the office the following week, sat in a smaller conference room, not the boardroom, and signed the amended agreement. He looked older than he had a week ago. He looked like a man who had finally run out of things to pretend. Andre watched him sign and thought about Walter, about the way the old man had seen all of this coming before any of it happened. Harold would have to live with that knowledge now, that his own father had looked at the family he built, looked at the son-in-law nobody gave enough credit to, and made a different choice. That was consequence enough. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday. Andre's attorney handled it. He didn't watch it happen. He didn't need to. He had been careful and fair in what he asked for. The house, his car, the accounts that were his before the marriage. He didn't reach for more than what was his. He didn't need to. The asset concealment Camille had attempted, the quiet repositioning of joint accounts in the weeks after the firing, was already documented. Her attorney would advise her quickly that she was not in a strong position to negotiate. She had assumed she would walk away comfortable. She had assumed he had nothing. She had been wrong about him for a long time. Preston's fallout came from the industry itself, without Andre having to do anything further. Mercer Freight defaulted within 6 weeks of the renegotiated contract taking effect. The $400,000 exposure Andre had laid out in that boardroom became real. The story moved through the logistics trade press quietly but efficiently. The kind of item that doesn't make front pages, but gets read carefully by everyone who matters. Preston Sinclair's name was attached to it. The contracts he'd signed, the terms he'd approved without oversight. He had wanted to run a company. Now people in the industry knew what that had looked like. The renaming happened in the spring. Whitfield Logistics and Freight. Clean. Direct. No borrowed legacy in it. Yvonne's promotion came the same week. VP of Operations. She had earned it years before Andre ever had the power to give it to her. And he told her that plainly when he handed her the offer letter across the desk. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at him. "You're not going to make a speech, are you?" she said. "No," he said. "Good," she said, and signed it. Desmond joined as general counsel on retainer, with an office on the 4th floor and a standing Tuesday meeting with Andre that rarely ran longer than 40 minutes because they both preferred it that way. The company grew steadily. No reckless expansion, no borrowed credibility, just good work, done consistently by people who knew what they were doing. The letter arrived on a Friday, almost exactly 1 year to the day from the boardroom meeting. It came from the estate attorney's office in a plain envelope with a handwritten note clipped to the front. Per Mr. Walter Sinclair's original instructions, to be delivered 1 year following full assumption of ownership. Andre sat with it for a moment before opening it. The letter was 1 page. Walter's handwriting, shaky near the end but still legible. Andre read it slowly. "Andre, if you are reading this, you waited. And if you waited, you did it right. I want you to know something I never said out loud while I was alive. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I thought saying it too early might change things. I didn't give you this company because you married my granddaughter. I had already decided before that. I gave it to you because in 30 years of building something, I only ever saw one other person who understood what it actually cost. That was you. Whatever it took to get here, however long it took, it was always yours. Not because of them. In spite of them. Take care of it. Walter Andre set the letter down on the desk. He sat with it. Outside, the city was going about its day. Traffic sounds, a distant horn, the low hum of the building settling into morning. His building, his company, his name on the door. He didn't smile right away. He just sat there and let it be true, all of it, for the first time without holding anything back. It had always been his. He had always known that. But there was something different about finally being able to believe it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.